Hi, everyone. This is Lena Jamul, MAPE's Executive Director. Thanks for joining us today. We've got lots to update you on this afternoon, but before we begin, we want to take a moment of silence to honor the life of George Floyd, a man whose life was wrongfully taken while he was under police custody, and to grieve his death. So please, let's all take a moment. Thank you. When we started to put this Tele-Townhall together, the purpose was to debrief with members the end of the legislative session and to introduce MAPE's statewide president-elect. We will still do all that, but we want to take a moment and address the devastating events in Minnesota in the last week. I listened to the mayor of St. Paul, Melvin Carter's comments yesterday, and this is what I took away. The need to acknowledge the sadness, grief, trauma, anger, and rage that is impacting all of us, but is impacting our brothers and sisters, our siblings, and the African American community disproportionately. I've talked to a number of African American MAPE members in the last week, and I want to echo their words. For every incident captured on camera, there are countless incidents that we never see. As Mayor Carter said, this is a time of deep soul searching for many of us. May we all use this as a turning point towards justice. And if you have ideas of what that ought to look like in MAPE and the role you want to play in that, we want to hear from you. Please email us at action@mape.org. I also would like to announce that the Organizing Council's Equity Diversity subgroup is accepting applications on the MAPE website. For those who seek to divide us, in Minnesota, we believe in pitching in for our neighbors, no matter their color, faith, or origin. And I'm going to hand the microphone over to MAPE statewide president, Tofan.
Or vice president, that is. Thanks, Lena.
Vice president, thank you.
As Lena said, we got a lot to share with you this afternoon. We'll announce the winners of MAPE's recent election. We'll hear from our new statewide president. We'll also have a brief wrap-up of the legislative session, including passage of MAPE's 2019-21 contract. We'll talk briefly about upcoming union plans, including Delegate Assembly and upcoming statewide elections in November. We're also looking forward to answering your questions. If you've got a question and are listening on the phone, please hit *3 to ask your question. If you've joined us through the MAPE website, please submit questions through MAPE's web platform. Right now, I'm going to pass the microphone back to the MAPE Executive Director, Lena Jamul, who will have a legislative update to share. Lena, thank you.
Thanks, To. So we know there's great interest in the MAPE 2019-2021 contract and its passage. So we want to just take a minute to explain what happened at the end of the legislative session and to take any questions. So the contract ratification process outlined in law differs from the traditional legislative process of how a bill becomes a law, in that for the contract ratification process, they only require the ratification approval to take permanent effect. The House passed it largely along party line votes in mid-May, and the Senate passed it kind of very close to the end of session with some requests for modification. Here's the thing. Contracts are legal documents agreed to by two parties. And in this case, the two parties are the unions and Minnesota Management and Budget, or MMB. We are the only two parties who can modify or change the contract. The legislature does not have the legal authority to make changes or modifications. So by voting to pass the contract, even with modifications, MMB has determined that the Senate has approved the contracts. So the contracts, as most of you know, will continue with the same pay grid, the same healthcare plans, and the same 2.5% cost of living adjustment scheduled for July 1st, which is a month from today. The contracts were budgeted and paid for during last year's legislative session. That was the first year of the biennium. The contracts passed and got implemented because there was tremendous pressure from members to pass them. Both sides of the aisle agreed that our workers deserve recognition and that our work is valued. We shifted the debate by featuring workers who were on the front lines of COVID-19 relief, and those who were supporting those on the front line, and those who were moving mountains to keep the services going to the people of Minnesota under tremendous pressure. Hundreds of you called in your legislators, dozens of you shared your stories online, and some of you even were able to tell your stories to the press. And together, working with our friends and other unions, we passed this contract. We're grateful to live and work in a state that continues to value the importance of collective bargaining and uphold the integrity of the negotiations process. This modest contract is fair and was negotiated in good faith. And the wages let's not forget that the wages contained in the contract support our members, their families, and the local economy, which is part of the recovery from this crisis. I'm sure you'll have more questions about the contract, which we will get to soon. And just as a reminder, if you have questions for us about the contract, COVID-19 work assignments, or other topics, please hit *3 if you're listening on the phone. And if you're watching via the website, please submit a question through MAPE's web platform. Before I hand the microphone back to Toe, we wanted to make sure to have a couple of announcements for you. One is that if you're working on priority 1 or 2 functions and you need to roll over your vacation hours, as many of you know, the cap is 275 hours per fiscal year. And if you've accrued and are carrying over more than that, you will be able to carry over your vacation hours till the calendar year. Now, you must request this from your HR. And this we made this happen because MAPE and MMB signed a Memorandum of Understanding, MOU, to be able to make this happen. And if you have any difficulties, please contact a steward or your business agent. We also want to make sure that you know that MMB, following the governor's orders, have said that employees are able to do their work from home, that if employees are able to do their work from home, they must continue to do so. So this means that teleworking will be continuing for the next few months. If you believe that you can do your work from home, but are being told you have to come into the office, please get in contact with us. So Toe, back to you.
Thanks, Liam. It is great to have so many of you join us today. You will hear you will be the first ones in the union to learn who our new president is and hear from her. MAPE's new president is Megan Dayton. Megan is a state demographer in the Department of Administration. Members have been fortunate to have her represent us on both the Political Council as well as the Negotiations Committee. She is a steward in Local 701. Megan, congratulations. I look forward to serving with you on MAPE's Board of Directors. Please give a warm welcome to Megan Dayton, MAPE's new president.
Thank you for the introduction, Toe. The peaceful transition of power is the hallmark of a healthy democracy. And so I want to first thank our current president, Chet Jorgensen, for his 12 years of service to our organization. Thank you for everything you've done to move us forward, Chet. And now I'd like to thank the people of MAPE for choosing me to represent you. It's such an honor to be elected as your next president. I'm humbled that you would place your faith and trust in me. During this campaign, I asked you to take a chance on someone who had never even run for office before, and you took that chance. You had a choice between 5 great candidates, all of whom would have led you well. You chose a bold, progressive candidate, and I'm so excited to lead us into a new chapter for our organization. I'm deeply grateful, and I promise I will never stop working my heart out for you, never. Our campaign built a movement, a fight on behalf of millions of Minnesotans who are getting ripped off in a rigged economy and ignored. We came to fight for working families being told their cost of living adjustment is a raise they are not worthy of, and employees shouldering an ever-increasing share of skyrocketing medical coverage. We came to fight for temporary, unclassified employees who have been terrified that their source of employment might end for the last 3 years. We came to fight for respectful workplaces. We came to fight for the integrity and protection of the essential work we all do for the state. We came to fight for decency. We came to fight for justice. We came to fight for change. This new chapter is one not just for our organization, but for our communities, our state, our country, and even the world. COVID-19 sent our lives spinning in directions we didn't know were possible just a couple of months ago, and the recent murder of George Floyd would send our communities into further disarray. What we are witnessing in the aftermath is the voice of the unheard, marginalized members of our society who are so tired of the silence and the compliance that moves us nowhere. Whether we realize it or not, whether we admit it or not, this is the same fight of the working class. We fought and died for the 8-hour work week. We fought and died for the weekend. Now is the time for solidarity. To all of my fellow Minnesotans, I say in the end, we are all Minnesotans, and the union I lead will be a union for all. And now, as we go forward and meet our challenges head-on, we do so with intention, humility, transparency, and solidarity. Through this process, I will listen, for listen we must as we all go forward, listening together. Let us move into a period of repair, gradually lifting like the head of a sprinter as we prepare to meet these defining challenges of our time. Today is a day to celebrate how far our movement has come. It's a day to celebrate the dozens and hundreds of women who have never run for anything before stepping up to put their names on the ballot. We ignored the leaders who said we should wait our turn. We ignored the voices who said we should cover our tattoos and smile more. We ignored the powerful members of society who never took us seriously. We refused to let anyone stand in our way, and that is how real change begins. The road ahead of us will not be easy. The powerful members in our legislature don't give up just because they get knocked down. Our Senate is still captured by the wealthy and the well-connected, and the economy is still rigged against working people, women, and communities of color. Yes, it's going to be hard, but we will persist and we will deliver the change that our members deserve. Thank you to the members of MAPE, every single one of you. Whether you voted for me or not, I'm grateful for the opportunity to fight for you. Thank you to all, but remember, your work is not done. So much depends on what you do next, and I say you because this is your union. Show up for your local meetings. Sign up for the next steward training. Ask non-members to join us, and ask questions of your board members. Let us declare that our fight is not over until we have transformed our state, transformed our legislature into one that works for you, not just for the rich and powerful, but for everyone. And tomorrow, we get right back in the fight for a day when management doesn't write all the rules, the fight for a day when corruption cannot escape justice, the fight for a new day in Minnesota with a new kind of organized labor and leadership, a union and leadership of inclusion, not resentment, a union and leadership of courage, not fear. We've come so far together, but today we send a message to Minnesota. We are just getting started. Thank you.
Thanks, Megan. We look forward to welcoming you as president at the next board meeting. And it's not time for us to take questions and do our best to answer them. And since we're doing this remotely, the three of us are all in 3 different places. And so Leah Solo, MAPE's Public Affairs and Communications Director, will moderate the questions for us.
Yeah. Lena or Toe, do you want to just answer a number of people have asked about other election results? Do you just want to answer when those will be posted?
Sure. The results are on the MAPE website, I believe now, or if not now, will be very shortly. So if you go to the MAPE website, you'll be able to see the results of all the elections.
And then just want to add something that our business manager, Paul Sweiser, issued an email with the results of the elections to our board of directors. I believe it's earlier this afternoon here or morning. So if you have any questions at all, feel free just to reach out to Paul as well. Thank you.
There are a couple of questions online asking about the state budget and next steps that we expect to happen around the state budget. Lena, do you want to talk a little bit about your conversations with MMB?
Sure. Thank you, Leah. Yes, I do see that question, I think, from Melissa. Yes. So as some of you know, if you watch the budget projections, there was a $4 billion unanticipated change in this biennium budget with over $2 billion deficit. It is unclear to any of us what the future holds in terms of the budget. The budget projections that came out only had about a 45% confidence in the accuracy. They're typically, the forecasts and the projections are about a 65% confidence. And so right now is the time that agencies start preparing their budgets for the governor, and MMB gives them, some instructions on how to do that. And I don't want to get too ahead of that process, just to say that there's a lot of unknowns. But what we do know is that we want to challenge the myth of austerity. We know that the way to economic recovery is not to cut spending, but the way to economic recovery is to invest in public services that serve all Minnesotans. So we are going to be advocating for that position, and we'll keep you involved along with all of us as things unfold.
Great, thank you. The next question, Lena, sticking with you maybe, is just about next steps on COVID leave. Again, back to your conversations with MMB.
Yeah, thank you. This is another one of the unknowns of COVID leave. So the COVID leave policy is still in effect. And what MMB has told us is that the COVID leave policy is tied with the governor's emergency order. And so we're in conversations with MMB about what is going to happen to the COVID leave policy if the emergency order is lifted or not extended. So the emergency order goes through June 10th, and we will be given a heads up. So if there are any changes, we will notify you about those. But right now, MAPE and the other unions continue to advocate to keep the COVID leave policy as it is.
Great, thank you. This question is for Megan Dayton. What steps will you take to reach out and connect with members who did not vote for you?
Thanks, Leah. That's a great question. I mentioned in my speech just a moment ago that I am honored to be able to fight for all of our MAPE members, including the members who did not vote for me. This is a union of many different people, many different parts of the state, all equally important. I look forward to meeting with people from all over the state, lots of our different board of directors, and bringing in all different perspectives that I can find to make our union as successful as possible.
Great, thank you. There are a couple of questions that are coming through about headed back to work, physically going into buildings and such. I think just one's about particularly if you work in a building that is controlled by the county versus if you work in a building controlled by the state. And so, Lena, could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, thanks. Yeah, if the person who wrote that, if there's more specific, they can email us. But I say, so broadly, if you're still able to do your work remotely, MMB has come out and said, please continue to do that. Please continue to telework. So if you have a situation in your agency or a supervisor that's asking you to come into work, when you are able to continue your work remotely, we want to know about that. There are working groups that are putting together back to work plans, and MMB is committed to sharing those plans with us, with the unions. And so let us know if you're concerned about a particular agency. Please let us know, and we want to have a seat at the table for how those plans get to developed and have input on the plans before they're finalized.
Great. We have a question just about with the contract ratification and back pay back to July 1st of 2019. Lena, again, do you just want to clarify that?
Yeah, so our contracts were implemented late October. And so members, state employees, at least for MAPE, this is not all the state contracts. These were the MAPE and AFSCME contracts. Got the back pay check, I think around December time or maybe Thanksgiving, anyway, and kind of late fall, early winter, got a back pay check from kind of the July 2019. So you will see a raise starting from July 1st, 2020, and going forward, and that'll just be the cost of living adjustment, the 2.5%. And so there will not be back pays because our contracts have been implemented and in effect since October.
Great, thank you. And then there are a couple of questions about early retirement and chances of layoffs. Those kinds of conversations. So, if you want to address some of that.
Sure. Thank you, Leah. So I want to be clear here that at no point did the governor or the commissioner of MMB look at either our contracts or layoffs. So there's no relationship between our contracts being implemented and potential layoffs. And the reason for that is because our contracts were already budgeted for. And when you broke down the contracts, including the healthcare savings that actually the employer had shifted on healthcare costs to the employees, that the amount of money that would have been saved was pretty insignificant. So, so there's no relationship between the two. In terms of layoffs, right now, what MMB is looking at is those areas in the state agencies that rely on funding, direct funding from the public. So the zoo, for example, is two-thirds of the zoo's funding, and we've been working hard with with the people we represent at the zoo. The zoo has seen two-thirds of its funding cut. So that's the one place where we've seen layoffs because of the pandemic, and we'll, as we learn of other places, we'll work with those members and let everyone know what they are.
Great, thank you. We have a couple of questions for Megan that are really speak to current events, asking for some more thoughts on representation of people of color within MAPE's leadership and membership, and incorporating more anti-racist policies and ideas into MAPE. So I will let Megan address those.
We are a very unequal state in Minnesota. I moved here from the deep south and was shocked by the inequities that I experienced here in Minnesota. It's something that we need to fix and focus on as a union, in our local communities, as a state, at all levels of our activity. Racism can no longer be tolerated. We went to Lake Street in Minneapolis on Saturday. I brought my family to help the cleanup through a MAPE effort with some other members and some staff members. There were thousands of people walking around with brooms and shovels and wheelbarrows. I saw buildings that were burned and roofs collapsed, and the ones that weren't burned were boarded up in plywood. There were tables set out for donations. The sidewalks had all been swept of broken glass, and it felt like people were preparing for the fifth night of chaos. So we were witnessing the moment when we were switching from street festival to war zone, it seemed. What I've seen and what I've witnessed unfold since Monday, I've been reminded that the opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. And what we're experiencing right now is a great deal of 400-year-old pain and there are very few left who are indifferent to it. Some still oppose justice and equal rights, but there's no more room for indifference. What I see happening in our cities right now is as beautiful as it is ugly, and I don't think we know yet what to do with that. But something is bursting, and I feel the change. We have both short-term and more long-term conversations to have within our organization. One of the things that has been started is the subgroup on the organizing council, focusing on racial diversity. And I would love if people would send in their applications that are interested in working on this effort to make our union more diverse, more inclusive, and more representative of the full range of diversity that is in our organization. So we know that it's something that we need to focus on, and we need to focus on it both quickly and in a sustained manner.
Great. And I'll just follow up on that. We have a question, and I think either Megan or Lena, you could answer this, but I live 7 blocks from Minneapolis's 3rd precinct, and it has been very affected by the riots. Is there any leave available separate from vacation and sick that can be used for this situation and recovery efforts?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for that question. Let's see. I live about 5 blocks from where the killing of George Floyd happened, so I can definitely empathize. We'd have to look at the contract and look at your in your specific case. So I can't advise, but please get in touch with a business agent, or if you need to. And I'd have to look at the contract language, but we have what we do have in this. This is the leave that was granted on Thursday and Friday when MMB pretty much evacuated the state office buildings in the Twin Cities of leave with pay, emergency leave with pay. So we do have that in the contract. But in terms of individuals who are in the neighborhoods and are being impacted, we can certainly talk to MMB and see what there will be available. But right now the leave we have is what's in the contract.
Sticking with questions about the contract. I have a question. It is my understanding that you need to be below 275 hours vacation during the fiscal year. Is that correct, or does 275 roll over unless we requested that additional be carried?
Yeah, if you had been so you do need to request it if you think that you have not met the criteria for it to be rolled over. So if you have over 275 hours of vacation and you have not gone under that anytime during the fiscal year, you would need to request for your vacation hours to be rolled over.
And then continuing with COVID leave related questions, someone looking for an update on the situation for summer care for kids when programs and camps are canceled all over the place and appropriate care just isn't available. Looks like they don't want their kids to be doing screen time 9 hours a day.
Yeah, we did raise that with MMB, and they've definitely recognized the need to keep COVID leave through the summer because even though schools are closing, there's the normal summer activities are not resuming. So we would encourage you to, whatever your situation is, to contact your HR and submit the COVID leave. But yes, under the COVID leave policy as it is, people are eligible to take it through the summer for reasons of childcare.
Great. This is an easy one. Where can we find the list of priority 1 and 2 services? It's an easy answer in that there isn't a centrally located list. Lena, that's correct?
Yes, your agency should be able to tell you if you are performing priority 1 or 2 functions, and if you're not sure, let us know.
Great. Another question for Megan. Megan, what would you say is your number 1 priority to change former fee payers into full members?
Yeah, thanks, Leah. I think a lot of our former fee payers don't know that they're no longer members of our organization after the Janus decision. So if we could maybe find a list of those folks and reach out to them specifically to let them know that the default for their former fee payer status was not to be made into full member, but it was to drop their membership. I think we could bring a lot of those voices back into the fold. And it's something that we haven't, to my knowledge, focused on yet, and that could be a great way to boost our membership numbers back up maybe to where they used to be.
Great. So I'll just mention again, if you have a question, hit *3. If you joined us through the website, please feel free to submit your question through MAPE's web platform. Let's see. So a question about employees with underlying health conditions and return back to work where they would return back to work with small telework work cubes. Lena, do you want to talk about kind of return to work and where those conversations have been?
Yeah, so if you do have underlying health conditions, or if your area, you have to be accommodated for. The agency has to accommodate your underlying health conditions. And if you believe that the accommodations are not, and one of those accommodations can be telework, and if you believe the accommodations are not being met, we want to hear from you. So if people, if you're being asked to come in and there isn't adequate social distancing, or there's no masks provided, or cleaning hasn't been done appropriately, then we want to hear from you, especially if you believe that telework is absolutely an option for you.
Great. And then we have a question asking, can you remind people with excess vacation where they can find a place to donate those extra hours to folks who need it? A great question at this time. Tina, do you know the answer to that, or is it different at every agency?
I'm not sure, but there is a vacation donation program that you can donate to, and your HR should be able to tell you how to find that.
And MMB actually has a lot of resources on vacation donation programs. First step is to go on their website. Second is, to kind of follow their directions. Self-service leave donations, just go on MMB's website and you're going to find more instructions on that.
We have a question asking, is MACE sponsoring additional assistance for the protests, such as where I can donate food and clothing? I can answer. If you follow us on social media, we've posted a number of places where folks are asking for donations, and we can continue doing those posts to make sure folks know where to donate. Lena or Megan, do you want to add anything to that? Great. Another question for Megan. MAPE's membership rates have been slowly dropping. How do you plan to engage members who've dropped their membership or avoided signing up at all?
That's a great question, and it flows really nicely off of the one that we were just talking about post-Janus. And I think it has a lot to do with how we ran this campaign. We took a community perspective to the work that we were doing. We had non-traditional methods to run this campaign, given that we were all at home, and some limitations given what we were allowed to do and not. But we reached out to people who traditionally have not been contacted by the campaign, and I think that's how we move forward to talk to people who say they haven't been contacted by anyone campaigning or anyone from the union in a long time. So just to think about some non-traditional ways to go about bringing our members back into the fold. It's a big state. We have a lot of regions, a lot of locals, a lot of different perspectives that we can bring in. And using those non-traditional methods, I think, will work in our favor. And you know, the onus to expand this recruitment effort is for individual members to reach out to their coworkers and remind them to do the things I mentioned in my speech. Right? We have to attend our local meetings, bring a coworker with you, sign up for the next steward training, do all of those things that we talked about. Bring a friend along with you.
There are a couple of questions about campaigns that were off and running before COVID started consuming a lot of our attention. There's a question about folks that were working on pay equity submissions. And then also folks that are working on, I think it's both unclassified, that would be in the Minnesota state system, and then folks that are temporary unclassified in the administration. So I'll let Lena maybe talk a little bit about how we've been moving into some of those conversations, and then see if Megan has anything that she wants to add.
Sure. So if you have, if you're working on pay equity submissions, we'll continue to do our best to support those. We've recently had a pay equity submission approved at DHS and go through with it was a pay equity request that we've been working on with members for quite some time. So we were really pleased to see that. For the unclassified, issue, the calculation is that the state is probably going to hire more temporary workers, not less, especially as funding is uncertain. And so we think that the rights of temporary workers is going to continue to be a really important issue for us to work on. So the rights of temporary workers, and then pathways to permanency that are transparent and fair. So we anticipate the campaign will continue. It's gonna, it just might look differently than it did, back in February.
Great. We have a couple questions about moving back to in-person meetings. Just a general question on if maybe timeline for moving back to in-person meetings, and then a question about regularly scheduled local meetings. I'm wondering if Toe could answer the question about regularly scheduled local meetings, and maybe Lena can talk about overall.
Thank you very much, Leah. So we are basically abiding by the governor's executive orders. So, and then also, like certain agencies are deeming certain employees, to be essential, so they're coming back. And then I know that there are some employees that want to be back in the office working, They actually do have to speak with their supervisors about that. But right now, though, we are not planning to have any in-person meetings for the foreseeable future. But I think, we have actually explored many ways for us to continue to have productive meetings online through either GoToMeeting. MAPE does have, quite a few licenses, to allow member leaders to do that. And then, we do also have, Skype and then Microsoft Teams locally or, like at the agency level, for quick little meetings and stuff, depending on your agency's, like internet, guidelines and stuff like that, just, be reasonable about it. But right now, if you are in need of an in-person meeting, feel free just to talk with those your fellow team members and see if they're comfortable in doing that. But right now, the preferred method is just GoToMeeting or else just online meetings.
Yeah, thanks, Toe. I would just echo all of that and say we are following the governor's guidelines. So we're following the state guidelines, which is no gatherings over 10 people. And if those 10 people are together, they have to wear masks and be socially distanced. So we have no plans to resume in-person meetings until those state guidelines are changed.
Great. We have a question asking about Delegate Assembly and whether or not that's going to be online. Nina, do you want to?
Sure, we're trying to not talk over each other, but also so the DA committee, the DA planning committee is meeting and planning, and I know they're working on a contingency plan of holding DA remotely, but a final decision hasn't been made.
Great. I think we have time for maybe one more question. So let's see. We've got a lot of folks who are asking kind of specific questions about their situations, and we will try to get those questions out to BAs and get you specific answers on them. But I'll maybe wrap up with one that there's someone who's asking what kind of for folks that are working at the Capitol complex, if they're supposed to go back into work. It had been shut down earlier. And so I don't know that we've heard anything new from MMB, but I'll give that over to Lena and see if she has any news about that.
No, that's right, Leah. We've not heard anything new from MMB, but we have a meeting with them tomorrow, so we'll know more about that. And obviously, it's a fluid situation, but we want to hear more from you of what the situation has been like today in the downtown complex if you went into work. So let us know about that.
If I can jump in, I'm a Capitol Complex employee, and I've been receiving communications both from the Capitol Complex and from my department, the Department of Administration, letting me know when things shut down and then when things open back up. So I received a call this morning saying that the Department of Administration would be open, so those employees who were expected to report for work should do so. And my husband is also a MAPE member, and he was not getting those calls. So if you go into self-service and you can make sure that your cell phone number is listed, those automated messages should be able to get in contact with you so that you know you have the most up-to-date information that is available.
Great. All right. With that, it's about time for us to wrap up. So I will hand this over to Cho for a couple of closing thoughts.
Thanks, Leah. And thanks so much for spending part of your afternoon with us. We've heard from many of you that you enjoy hearing from other members and getting updates through these MAPE Tele-Townhalls. So we'll continue using this as our communications tools. We want to remind you that the Delegate Assembly is scheduled for Saturday, September 19th. If you want to submit the resolution to be considered at DA, there will be a resolution writing webinar on Tuesday, June 9th. You can find more information on the website at www.mape.org. We also elected a new negotiations committee, and we'll be hearing about some of their plans at a later date. I'll turn this over to Lena. Thanks.
Thanks, To. So we'll keep you up to date on how the COVID-19 pandemic is affecting our members and work assignments and agencies, and we expect that to be continuously changing, but we'll keep up to date with the changes and make sure that employee and worker voices are part of the decisions that get made at every step. And we're also going to be in touch soon to discuss the upcoming November elections. We are going to have a real opportunity to elect pro-worker candidates to represent us in the legislature. That's going to be key, not just for us, but for a just economic recovery and for really putting public services front and center as part of the economic recovery for all of Minnesota. So we're finding now more than ever that elections matter and have consequences for our lives and our work. It's important that we elect lawmakers who will support state workers, who will support public services, and will support our agencies and support collective bargaining. So thanks again for listening today, and we'll look forward to talking with you soon. Have a great rest of your afternoon. Be safe, everyone.